Hi class, this is going to be my presentation of Wonder Boys. So let's just jump right in. There's a lot to unpack here. This book was such a roller coaster, and I have looked at my other peers' presentations this far, and I think we all kind of agreed on we kind of lost where the driving question was because there was just so much happening in this book. Here we have a teacher who's trying to finish writing his novel and hopefully saves his editor's career. But there's just so much else happening on the side that there is just what becomes the priority. Does Sarah want to keep her baby? Does Grady want to make amends with his wife? Like, there's just so much here. And I want to talk about Grady Tripp's character because I feel like, that's the point that starts it all. Grady just, I feel like, has endured so much loss in his life from his mother's passing at such an early age to his father's suicide. um, I feel like there's obvious theme of mommy issues and just being loved by women. I know that in the book he says that every single marriage he's had. I mean, he's been married 3 times up to this point, and never had kids, but constantly cheating. Every time he's gotten divorced, it was because of a him problem. And you can just see that theme almost right away. It's like, oh well, okay, he lost his mom, he lost his dad, who's pretty old. He was an orphan so early on, and so he just craves love from women. And I just see this theme going along through the entire book because then he kind of starts having feelings for Hannah. And at one point, I believe he says in the book that he's kind of in love with her, but it's just such a drastic thing to say. Like, this is your student, you're married, you have a lover already. How can you possibly be in love with 3 people? So I feel like after reading that part is just 100%, this is a theme, this is what's happening with the character, and it makes you understand him more. He tells the truth to himself about almost anything, but he can't seem to tell the truth to others. There was a couple of lines of dialogue where he's telling Sarah that he loves her, wants to be with her, but in his head he's like, I'm not sure if I want to be with you. And uh, I found that to add to his character on a lot. I also did catch on that he tells himself almost the truth about everything, except when it comes to his writing. I know at the beginning he said that a lot of people suffer from writer's block, but not him. He actually writes, he overwrites. He has 2,000 plus pages of this book that he's trying to finish but can't. And at first I read that like, oh, okay, well, show off. But then after I reached the end, it was like, wait, was he saying that sarcastically? What did he mean? No, it couldn't be me. I don't have writer's block, but kind of almost insinuating that he does. Just sarcasm. But I wasn't really able to be super clear on that. Um, but yeah, I mean that's a little bit about Grady. I feel like he's not a protagonist that I necessarily rooted for, but he's not a protagonist that I hoped would have an awful downfall either. And we'll get to why I feel that way in a narration slide, which is coming up shortly. Now move on to James. James Lear is my favorite character, and I'm not just talking about this novel in particular, but he is probably my favorite character of all time. And here's why. I want to desperately aspire to write someone like James because he's just so mysterious and there's just so much to his character. But you have things that add on to who he is without actually saying the words. I know that throughout the book, Terry and I believe Antonia and other characters throughout the book say, "Man, that boy's messed up. Like he's so messed up," and he is. But we don't necessarily have to wait until those lies are said to believe that he is or to think that he is. We kind of just have this kind of incident with the gun and then him kind of lying about his parents and like, are you wealthy? Are you not? Are your grandparents your actual parents? Are you an actual orphan? Was this article in the newspaper the truth? And it's just so, so mysterious. And I believe that maybe he, kind of likes to write about himself through his work, through his novels, and that's why he finished them so fast. Is because he's trying to tell, people something, but it kind of just goes over their head, and maybe that's why the students, and maybe even Grady didn't like his work at the beginning because it was always the same thing. It was always the same thing. But um, the turning point for me was when he was telling Grady that, those aren't his parents, that they're actually his grandparents. But after Grady reads the manuscript, after he left it, and he reads the story where, um, you know, I mean, the lady gets, sexually assaulted by her father-in-law and therefore got pregnant, and then there's this kid, and it's like, oh, well, was he telling the truth? Is his grandfather also his father? And it's just like so mind blowing, and he's just so like kind of difficult to unpack, but it's just like give me more without giving me more. And I don't know, I just think he's someone that I aspire to create one day, not necessarily in all the same, you know, places, but something similar. Like that is such a well written character. I almost fell in love. I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's just so much to unpack here, but I almost don't want to know. I want him to tell me, but then I don't want him to tell me. Like, if that's what I mean when this book was such an emotional roller coaster. Like, I found myself rooting more for James than I did for Grady, and I wanted James to succeed, and at the end he did. He got that editor. So maybe at one point James does become the protagonist, then kind of becomes a hero. Um, yeah, the narration. I love the way this book is narrated because it really helped me see things for what they are in the protagonist's head. Like if I wasn't there with him, looking at everything unfold, it almost seemed like I was in his head, listening to him just because of the way he was writing. It's almost like he's like narrating through a diary. Like it's almost like he's writing this down in a diary, and I get to read it, and I get to be there with him. And it just opened the door for a lot of sympathy and a lot of understanding of the character. And I know that most of the stuff that he does is wrong, but because it's written in his perspective, it is easier to understand why he makes the choices that he does, and why he says the things that he does, and why he does the things that he does. And I almost want to take that into consideration for my own novel. Maybe I should switch it from third person to first person because I just liked how many more doors it opens to understanding your character, to the reader. And I do believe the narration is one of the strongest parts that this book has. It's just filled with, it just opens the door for a lot of description and a lot of insight coming from your character and how to perceive things from his point of view. And I really thought, the first person was the way to go for this story. Uh, the setting, from Marilyn Monroe's jacket, and that's in the safe, to the tuba case and the trunk of the galaxy, I was really able to vividly see the setting, and I love that because we already have narration with the setting, so it's like I'm there. I can see it all unfold. I can see James shooting the dog. It's just like I loved. I loved that description, the vivid description of me having the there. However, I do think that sometimes the description was just too much. It's almost like, okay, don't insult my intelligence. I'm sure I can gather up a setting from the little that you gave me, because at one point there was just so much description I forgot what the original thought even was. And a good example for this could be when they go to the farm to visit Emily. There's just a lot of description. We have what they're wearing, where they're at, what they look like, the mom in the chocolate bar. The chocolate bar has probably been there for months. But it's like, okay, I don't care. Give me the dialogue. Are you going to talk to Emily? Are you going to tell her that, Sarah is expecting? Like, there's just so much that wasn't said. And I know that it's hinted at that, Emily does find out that he impregnated his lover, but I almost wanted him to say it with his whole chest. I wanted to see that. I doesn't I don't think I was satisfied with just you know, the insinuation that she knew. I wanted to 100% be there for that conversation. I mean, they drove along all this way and they don't really say a full sentence to each other. We have bits and pieces of him trying to go in the bathroom, but she's in the shower, or I mean, she's taking a bath, or like them at the dinner table, but they didn't really talk one on one. And that is something that, as the reader, I desperately needed. I wanted to see who he was really in love with Emily or with Sarah. But then after I didn't get the dialogue that I wanted, it's almost like he just settled for Sarah because Emily wouldn't talk to him. But I didn't really get to see if he actually made that decision because he genuinely loved Sarah above Emily or what, So and at one point, and I've read this on my other peers' presentations, you do get lost. What's the end goal? Do we want to write this novel? Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about the novel. Do we want to have this baby? Okay, well, let's have a conversation about that. It's just, it was just a lot sometimes of description and going on and going on and going on that you kind of forget where we even started. That was my biggest complaint here. I also constantly had to reread and reread to make sure I was understanding what was happening because I would get just so lost at some points. Um, I had to do the book versus movie part because I love film, and after investing 10 plus hours of reading this book, I wanted to be able to see what I made up in my head match what would be presented if I were to actually see it in a motion picture. And I was just so let down. If you guys haven't watched the movie, please don't. That would be 2 hours wasted. The cast is awesome. It's super talented. It's just the screen, this the script was just awful. They cut out a lot. They kind of rearranged it to fit into the time frame. And I know, books can 100% be of the movie, but I just it was just so underwhelming. And they just cut off so much. I wanted to see Deborah and Grady's conversation because I think Deborah was a really good character to add on in. You have the cynical sister who kind of wants to have her sister's back, but kind of wants to know what's happening with Grady, wants to see that, wants Grady to spill the tea in a way. But I really wanted to see that and more of the book that the movie just said, no, let's not do that, and just cut the whole thing apart. So definitely don't watch the movie. Read the book again, which I probably would because it's such a great book, and I will probably uh, introduce it to my friends because it's just so emotional and it's just a lot to digest. But it's one of those books that you finish reading and you're like, wow, like I can't believe that was the ending. Like I really wasn't expecting that. I really was just expecting for Grady to be alone. Like when after I read that part where like, he had lost everything. He gave his weed out and all that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. He's gonna be alone. This is gonna be his downfall. And then that's not how it ended. So it's just like it's just a box of surprises. This book, and I am very thankful for having to read it. I would have never checked it out if I were to see it at the library because the back doesn't really give you a lot. I really didn't know what I was going to get when I read the back. I wasn't really sure what the book would be about. But after reading it, it's brilliant. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And I hope you liked my presentation. Thank you.